Hi, Doug. The administration famously does not take very well to judicial checks on its power. How are they responding this time?
Yeah, well, first of all, it is significant. It is a first significant legal setback. And I say setback because it's not definitive. This is a restraining order, an injunction against that mobilizing of federal forces, of in this case, Oregon's National Guard, federalizing it basically against these nightly protests that we have been seeing in Portland. Look, this is a move that will face a lot of appeals from the Trump administration. But as you said, the lawyers who basically argued for this injunction, and I will note, and it's important to note, that the judge who issued this injunction is a Donald Trump appointed judge. So this is a judge who came down for legal reasons and not political reasons, presumably, basically saying that Trump had specifically exceeded his executive authority in using or trying to use federal troops, as we call it, federalizing National Guard troops in a situation where local officials, state officials say they are simply not needed. Donald Trump's administration has used these troops, and specifically we're talking about National Guard troops. Each state has its own National Guard reserve, but they are considered U.S. troops. And he has justified this in the broad name of, as he says, combating crime and protecting immigration enforcement officials. State officials say that it is completely out of hand in the sense that they don't need the help of the feds, that they completely have these situations under control. In the case of Portland, there had presumably been a lot of back and forth coordination even between state and local officials and federal officials, and that there was a sort of understanding up until very recently that no, you really didn't have to call in the army, so to speak, that federal state officials were doing a perfectly fine job of containing and enforcing the law, as is their duty. So they see this as a dangerous transcending, an overstepping of executive authority. They see this not as what I said Trump says it is, combating crime, protecting immigration, i.e. ICE officials, right, Customs and Enforcement Administration officials. They don't see it as that. They see this as something masquerading as it's really political theater masquerading as crime enforcement, protecting immigration enforcement, political theater in one aim, with one objective, and that is to do Trump's bidding. And Donald Trump's bidding, as they see it in this case, is to exact political retribution against cities, and there's a short list of them right now. They've been deployed to L.A., to Washington, Portland right now with the restraining order, and Chicago is poised right now. And it's basically political theater, Donald Trump taking retribution against Democratic-led states that he sees as woke and doing the bidding of far-left radical Democrats.
Now, you mentioned Chicago there, Doug. Federal troops poised to deploy there as of this weekend, and this is coming against the wishes of the governor and other local officials.
Once again, in Chicago, what's happened there is there was an incident in which a woman in a car was shot. She wasn't killed. It wasn't a fatal shooting by officials who, after they had said that she had rammed a law enforcement and ICE vehicle at the scene, there was apparently another car involved with a man who was taken into custody. Obviously, the details at this point are unclear of exactly what happened, what motives were, if there were motives, what exactly transpired. But what this does seem to suggest is that exactly what a lot of the critics of these types of federalization of the army of troops moving them into cities where officials say they're not needed. In the case of Chicago, where I think 300 federal troops are poised to deploy there. They haven't been deployed yet, but there's a threat that they will imminently be deployed. The fear is that it will actually lead to greater violence because it's setting up a situation where you've had, in the face of these deployments, civil protests, as you have in American democracy time and again. People have a right to turn out and protest against what they see as over exceeding authority, the overuse of force, pushing back against these ICE officials that they think have no business being there. They say that it sets up a real tinderbox situation and it becomes a vicious circle. The ICE officials are there, you have protests against them. The protests set up a scenario where there can be violence, and the violence then creates further justification from the administration's point of view for deploying or keeping those guards there. So it's very volatile. It is, like I said, it's a powder keg, it's a tinderbox.
And ultimately, Doug, do you see this as a showdown about federal versus states' rights, or is it something completely different?
It's a little bit of everything here, right? Well, clearly it is raising the questions of federal versus state rights. What I mean is under, the violation of the 10th Amendment of the Constitution that basically allows for the states to have certain prerogatives over the federal government. And what's interesting here is that the lines have never been clear. There are always those more in favor of state rights, those more in favor of federal rights. But what a lot of the detractors and the critics, and there are a lot of forceful critics against these policies, are saying that they are unnecessary right now, and that it seems that Donald Trump is enlisting the military, which is supposed to be obviously a nonpartisan, the most nonpartisan of American institutions, there to protect Americans from threats from abroad, using it and deploying it in a sense against its own citizens on U.S. soil, which is not completely unprecedented. We've seen deployments, obviously, during the U.S. Civil Rights Movement. It's happened in American history. So this isn't breaking news in that sense. But what it is we are seeing it right now very concentrated in a certain very, very concentrated period of time by a president who has clearly and explicitly laid out an agenda of going after what he sees as, he quotes, the enemy within, and using the military against the enemy within. So setting up a context, a scenario in which U.S. soldiers can be potentially deployed against U.S. citizens because there are civil disturbances that Donald Trump doesn't agree with, doesn't like, and doesn't think should happen. Therefore, the military, he thinks, is justified in seeing off that threat. It's not that it's unprecedented, but we're seeing a lot more of it, and it's raising a lot of hackles in a lot of places in America right now.
Douglas Herbert, thank you very much, as always, for that very detailed roundup.